What is the most widespread and disturbing Halloween myth of all? And what should we really be afraid of? In today's story, I'll uncover the truth behind this age-old Halloween legend. And it all starts with a little boy named Timothy. Halloween night 1974 is a misty, rainy one. But who cares, right? It's gonna take more than just a little mist to deter the thousands of kids in Pasadena, Texas who've been gearing up for this night for weeks. And that includes 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien in his Planet of the Apes costume and his 5-year-old sister Elizabeth. Their dad, Ronald, puts a raincoat on over his white optician's smock that he wore for work. He says hi to his neighbor Jim Bates and his 2 children, and the 6 set out into the night to trick-or-treat around their suburban neighborhood. And as they walk along, one of the houses doesn't have any lights on, but the kids go up and bang on the door anyway. Leave no stone unturned, right? But there's no answer. Growing impatient, the kids run off to the next house, and Jim follows. And Ronald takes his time a little bit and lags behind just to see if somebody's going to answer. Catching up a few minutes later, Ronald says, "You guys need to learn a little bit more patience. There was somebody in that dark house after all." And he produces a handful of 21-inch pixie sticks, tubes of powdered sour candy sweetness. And Ronald hands a tube to each of the 4 children. And there's 1 stick left. And as the group is walking home, Ronald spies a 10-year-old that he recognizes from church. So he gives that boy the last pixie stick. Now, before bed, Timothy is allowed 1 snack out of his Halloween haul, and he picks his pixie sticks tube. And he carefully lifts the flap of the tube, widens the opening, and upends the straw, waiting for the powder. But it's stuck in the tube. So Ronald takes the straw and rolls it between his palms to loosen the powder and hands it back to his son, who immediately tips the straw end up and takes in a mouthful of the sugary treat. And his face wrinkles. "This is so gross," he says. "It tastes bitter." So his dad grabs him a glass of Kool-Aid to wash the taste away. And Timothy immediately begins to complain that his stomach hurts, and he runs to the bathroom where he starts vomiting and convulsing. And Ronald runs into the bathroom and holds his son while he's vomiting, and Timothy goes limp in his arms. An ambulance is called, but Timothy O'Brien dies en route to the hospital less than an hour after consuming the candy. Harris County prosecutor Mike Hinton was on call that night and got the call that there was a suspicious child death. And wanting to get this investigation underway as quickly as possible, he puts in a call to Dr. Joseph A. Jakimchek, who is the Harris County Chief Medical Examiner. The investigators give the doctor what few details they have of the case so far, and the doctor asks, "What does his breath smell like?" A call to the morgue reveals that there is the scent of almonds coming from the boy's mouth. And Dr. Jakimchek says, "That's cyanide." An autopsy proves the medical examiner's hunch. Timothy has been poisoned. Knowing that this took place immediately after he ingested that pixie stick, the first question that the police have is, where are the rest of the pixie sticks? The remaining 4 of the 5 sticks that Ronald said that he received from the neighbor are all recovered by the police. And thankfully, none of the other children had consumed the candy. The parents of the 5th child, the one that Ronald recognized from church, were hysterical when they couldn't find that piece of candy when alerted by authorities. And the parents rushed upstairs to where their son was sleeping in his bedroom, only to find him lying in bed with the straw clutched in his arms. The boy had been unable to open the staples that sealed the wrapper shut and fell asleep trying. Forensic investigators discovered that all 5 pixie sticks had been opened, and the top 2 inches of candy powder had been replaced with potassium cyanide powder and then resealed with a staple. And according to the pathologist who tested the pixie sticks, the candy that Timothy consumed was enough cyanide to kill 2 adults, while the other 4 tubes contain enough cyanide to kill 4 to 5 adults. Timothy's death from poisoned Halloween candy understandably makes Pasadena parents go a little nuts, and hundreds of parents go to the police station and turn in the candy that their kids collected while trick-or-treating, just in case it's laced with poison too. Enough to fill an entire room at the Pasadena police station. Now, initially, police don't know who to suspect. In a case like this, usually the primary suspects are the parents or the immediate family. But Timothy's family is there with him at the hospital, obviously mourning their loss. So the police give Ronald a little bit of time, and when he's ready, they take him back to that neighborhood so he can point out the house where he got the pixie sticks. But Ronald is stumped. He just can't find the house. And he tells the officers he never saw the face of the person responsible, that a hairy arm had just emerged from the doorway of the dark house and handed him the candy. Couple of days go by and the investigators are incredibly frustrated. So they take O'Brien out again and start leaning on him a little, saying, "You've got to give us something. You have to remember where this candy came from." O'Brien and his neighbor had only taken their kids to the houses on 2 streets because it had been raining. And after learning that none of the homes that they visited had given out pixie sticks, the first flags of suspicion went up in the investigators' heads. But the extra pressure put on by police works, and after walking the neighborhood for the 3rd time with the police, O'Brien's memory is jogged and he leads them to the house where no one had answered the door. The home is owned by a man named Courtney Melvin. Melvin is an air traffic controller at Houston's William P. Hobby Airport and isn't home when police come knocking. So officers go to his place of work and arrest him in front of all of his colleagues. Mystery is over. Case closed, right? Except Melvin has an alibi. Turns out he was working that night and didn't get home until after 11 p.m. Timesheets and 200 people can confirm that. His wife and daughter were actually home that night, but had turned out the lights early because they ran out of candy. Police also hear that O'Brien was angry with his relatives for not staying up late the night of Timothy's funeral, which is odd. Ronald had written a song about Jesus and Timothy joining his Lord in heaven, and was pissed off when his grieving family wouldn't stay up late to watch a recording of the performance being broadcast on TV. And prosecutor Mike Hinton says that's when he knew something strange was going on. So the police start digging deeper into Ronald O'Brien. And soon after, the police interrupt Mike Hinton, the prosecutor, as he's teaching a class at the Pasadena Police Academy. They cannot wait to talk to him. They discovered that Ronald had recently taken out life insurance policies on both of his children, $10,000 per child in January of that year. And then, over the objections of his insurance company, an additional $20,000 per child a month before Halloween. Investigators already know that Ronald is over $100,000 in debt, which is more like $500,000 in today's dollars. And in the 10 years leading up to Halloween of 1974, O'Brien had held 21 jobs and was suspected of stealing at his current job and was about to be fired from there as well. His car was about to be repossessed. He'd already defaulted on several bank loans, and his house was being foreclosed on. And when investigators find out that he had called the insurers at 9 a.m. the morning after his son's death to inquire about the payout, they knew they were on the right track. The prosecutor asks for, and is granted, a search warrant to search the O'Brien's house. What do they find? Scissors. Scissors that, when tested, shows traces of a plastic residue similar to that found on the cyanide-laced sweets. Ronald O'Brien is arrested for Timothy's murder on November 5th, 1974. He's indicted on 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. And as the investigation continues, evidence starts to stack up against Ronald. Turns out, He was taking classes at a community college, and in class would ask questions like, which is more lethal, cyanide or another poison? Who asks that? Another witness, who works for a chemical company in Houston, tells police that a man had come in to buy some cyanide, but left after being told that the smallest amount that he could buy was 5 pounds. At this point, it is clear to investigators that Ronald O'Brien had laced the candies with poison ahead of time and hidden them up the sleeve of his raincoat when he left the house, all in an effort to kill his own children and collect on their life insurance policies. And he gave the other children poison candy in an effort to shed suspicion. But this is years before DNA and contactless debit cards, and the police can't put the pixie sticks in Ronald's hands or prove that he bought cyanide. So the 30-year-old optician says, "Wasn't me." Ronald enters a not guilty plea. His defense strategy? Blame the tainted candy on some untraceable boogeyman. The urban legend about some crazed individual who hands out Halloween candy laced with poison or needles or apples with razor blades inserted. And although police never discover where or when Ronald bought the poison, friends, family, and co-workers all testify against the man that the press is now calling the Candyman. During the trial, a chemist who's acquainted with O'Brien testifies that in the summer of 1973, O'Brien contacted him asking him about cyanide and how much would be fatal. Friends and coworkers testify that in the months before Timothy's death, O'Brien showed an unusual interest in cyanide and talks about how much it would take to kill a person. O'Brien's sister-in-law and brother-in-law testify that on the day of Timothy's funeral, O'Brien talks about using some of the insurance payout to take a long vacation. Ronald's wife even claims that Timothy didn't choose the pixie stick that night, that Ronald forced him to choose it. The trial that began in Houston on May 5th, 1975, ends on June 3rd, 1975, with the jury taking only 46 minutes to return a guilty verdict on 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. And after only 71 minutes, it is decided that Ronald O'Brien will be executed by the electric chair. And according to Reverend Carol Pickett, a chaplain who works for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, O'Brien is hated by his fellow inmates for killing his own child and is absolutely friendless. In fact, the inmates actually petition the prison administration to hold an orderly demonstration on the night of O'Brien's execution so they can show everybody else how much they hate him. And on March 31st, 1984, with a crowd of about 300 demonstrators gathered outside of the prison, yelling and cheering, shouting "trick or treat," Ronald O'Brien was executed by lethal injection. Now, before and since the Pasadena, Texas poisoning, rumors of tainted candy being handed out always surface around Halloween. But whether the fear is that somebody's handing out candy with broken glass in it, or razor blades, or that somebody's handing out ecstasy pills, there is little to no evidence to show that parents have anything to worry about. In fact, there haven't been any documented cases of strangers poisoning Halloween candy at all. Ever. Now, in 2000, there was a man in Minneapolis who was charged with putting needles in Snickers bars that he then handed out to trick-or-treaters. However, the only victim was a teenager who felt a slight prick from the sharp object. That's it. We tend to be extra wary and suspicious of strangers on Halloween. But Timothy O'Brien is the only child who has actually died or even been seriously injured by consuming contaminated Halloween treats. And in that case, it was his father that was the monster all along. So now that you have a big thumbs up for Halloween candy this year, why not share this video with friends and family who have trick-or-treating children and maybe help lower their anxiety this year? And we will see you again on the In-Between.